How's it going, everyone? Jacob here. Today, I'm going to talk about playing realistic drums on keyboard. The first tip is to play with expression and dynamics, which is what a real drummer will do. Now, to do those things, what you need is something that's touch sensitive, a keyboard that will respond to you playing soft or loud, and then you need probably a pretty good drum VST, virtual instrument, that sounds like a real kit that a drummer would play. One of my go-to drum plugins is from Kontakt, and this one is the Abbey Road 80s drummer, which I really like. I think all of these drum kits sound good in this virtual instrument pack. And I played it for you actually a little bit in the beginning. In that intro you heard, I played along with a loop. But let me play the drums a little bit for you now so you can really hear the quality of these samples. Now, one thing you can hear, even though I'm playing on a keyboard and triggering samples, it's not a real kit. The samples in the kit are real. They were recorded from a real drummer. And what you can hear in the way that I play is expression and dynamics. One cool trick is, and I love the way that this is set up, and this is the kind of setup for the MIDI notes on the keyboard for drums that I prefer, which is to have the snare drum be in two notes here. So D and E are both snare. But you can kind of hear they're slightly different pitches so that when you do them together in succession like that, it almost sounds like a single stroke roll. And you can add accents if you play a little harder, a little softer, and you can get a pretty realistic sound. Now you can hear, some fluctuations in the time, the consistency, and where I'm putting accents, but, I'm not a keyboard drummer. It's something that I do, but it's just a way to get the data in, right? So something that I always think about is I want to get close, right? I don't want it to sound robotic from the beginning. A lot of times if I can play the parts the way that I'm hearing it, get it really close, then you can do more work on it after. But what you always want to be doing is listening close to what sounds realistic or not. If you play something or a fill and you listen back to what you recorded and you're like, that didn't sound like something drums would do at all. It sounds like if you do something like, all those notes are at the same velocity and it just does not sound realistic at all to me. But something like maybe there was expression in there. I was trying to play with dynamics, as I've said, which is what a drummer will do. Next tip is to quantize, but be careful when you quantize, and I'll talk about what I mean. So there you go. Now, something real quick though, you might notice that usually I'm focusing on hi-hat kick snare or a ride kick snare or bell, which is the bell of the cymbal. I like those colors. So I really don't have it worked out where I can put a hi-hat on 2 and 4 like a drummer would do, doom, 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 with their left foot. Doom, 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 doom. That's usually what they're doing. Just a quick word. Sometimes I'll go in and add that. But a lot of times when I'm laying down quick parts, I just don't think about it. But it's just, again, another realistic thing to add that you can think about, because a real drummer playing a groove like that on a ride probably is going to be playing hat with their foot on 2 and 4. So let's look at the MIDI of what I just recorded. So open that up. And I thought that, overall my time was pretty locked. I drifted here and there from the click just a little bit, but that's kind of human, right? Well, what if I were to go in there, if I select all, and I quantize, and I were to snap it all to a 16th note, completely 100% on the grid. Now this is what it sounds like. That sounds pretty good, right? And, you know, maybe that's what you want, is a super gridded drum part. But just to back up there, if you go back in and quantize again, maybe what we can do is say we don't want to do it 100%. Maybe we want to do like 70% or even 60%. And actually maybe even turn humanize up if that's a function you have. And that will actually vary it just a little bit so it's not so gridded and robotic. So let's listen to that. Now it's pretty subtle. That was pretty subtle. But if you get in close, you can see like some of these notes are not right on the grid. They're a little off. And this is just a quick example, basically just to tell you that when you're getting into recording MIDI drums, you're playing on the keyboard, if you overdo quantization, sometimes it will make it sound robotic. Why? Because humans are not perfect. No one has perfect exact time where they hit every beat exactly where it's supposed to go. There's a little, I had a really good teacher one time that told me that when people play together live, the time is kind of like an ocean, right? It's like waves. It's like it kind of goes up and down. It's not a constant. Everybody isn't locked like robots. It moves a little bit. But when everybody plays together in a musical way, in an expressive way, you feel the time, and good musicians can do that well. So again, if you're going for realistic drums, you want to try to achieve that. You want to play with quantization going from unquantized to perfect and trying to find a good balance. Next tip is to use velocity curve settings, but like quantization, don't overdo it, or at least just be careful, tread lightly. So I'll show you. If I go back into Contact, I can go to options here, and I have internal velocity settings. So the default setting is linear, which is just straight like this. So if I play soft, it's soft. If I play loud, it's loud. And I generally find I can be pretty expressive that way, but maybe I don't want to have to work as hard to play higher velocity notes, or maybe I just want a more consistent higher velocity sound so that all those drums are striking at a louder volume. So if I change this to this setting, now if I play about a medium average intensity, here's the volume. So I'm gonna play the same thing, same way on the other setting. Hear how quiet it is? If I go back up. So now I don't have to work nearly as hard, and I can play pretty loudly. Like I'm barely playing. I'm really playing softly. But now what you'll hear is that expression's gone, right? It's harder for me to do it. In a way, this is almost like changing the velocity before you play. So rather than editing it after in the piano roll, I'm sort of doing it first. I'm making sure all the velocities are higher. And sometimes you may want this, like for playing fast. But to use a word I've used a few times already, robotic. It starts to sound a little robotic. All those toms being hit at the exact same velocity, you're hearing the same sample, the same recorded sample of a drummer hitting the drum at that volume played over and over. And it sounds really robotic and not realistic. So just be careful. Sometimes there's uses for this kind of thing, but if you want realism, use it sparingly. And just so you hear, if you want to go super robotic, you can go to fixed. So everything is the same exact velocity no matter what I do. Now sometimes I actually might use that, especially if I'm doing something that's rock and it's really heavy and I need all the drums just hitting really hard, boom, big beat that just goes and doesn't stop. Sometimes I might use a setting like that because I want a consistent backbeat and I don't want too much variation in expression, so I'm not hitting the wrong sample or triggering the wrong sample so that all of a sudden the kick doesn't sound as present. Because just a quick word on VSTs, that's what you're getting here. They've recorded several different samples for each note at different volumes. So a drummer kick to kick this hard, then this hard, and this, and this. And you can hear variation between those samples. You can hear the first one get a little louder, then it goes to the next one, that gets a little louder, and then the next one, the top, which is the hardest you can hit it. So just know that, you're playing with probably, it sounds like to me, 3 levels of samples. There's 3 files on each note for each drum. And that's just something to think about when you're playing. And especially when you're editing the MIDI, when you're editing the velocity later. Next tip, we've talked about a little bit, and this is to tweak the velocities after recording. So you're gonna find mistakes. Again, you're playing drums on a keyboard. So you're gonna hit one drum too hard. You're gonna hit one too soft. You're gonna play a fill that doesn't quite have the expression you want or sounds a little too robotic or whatever it is. So it's simple. You're just gonna go into the MIDI editor and you're gonna start playing around with stuff. And you can, make it all super loud if you want. Or you can just change individual notes. You can say, well, maybe I would have liked to hit this kick a little harder, well, okay. And then you can take it back there, listen to what you're doing. Something I do a lot is I'll select, say, all the kick notes. I'll click the C here on the keyboard, and now I've got all the kick notes selected. And you can see them that they're pretty consistent, but every now and then there's some dips. And if I don't like it, the way it sounds, or I want them all to hit a little closer, maybe I'll raise them up. Till I get them consistent. And now, you'll have less variation in volume, but more consistent attack on that kick. So that's just an example of how editing after you record can be a powerful tool. Next tip is don't be afraid to start with a simple groove. I was getting a little fancy there just because it's fun playing fills and stuff while I'm playing, but a lot of times that can be what slows you down. And there are some people that amaze me at their efficiency and technique playing keyboard drums, or maybe they play on pads like these. I tend to gravitate towards the keys because I'm a keyboardist at heart, and that's what I'm more comfortable with. But you can do whatever you want. But the main point here is you don't have to do your best, like most virtuosic drumming, what's in your head right away. You can start with something simple. So you might just start with recording like, or even just the kick and snare. Just get that down, and then maybe later you go in and add the hat stuff. And then maybe you have another spot every few bars, every 4, 8 bars, and you do a little drum fill. And so you're kind of piecing it together, right? Rather than having to play it all live, which can be kind of hard. That's just something that I've learned. It's helped me get closer to what I want and also have more control along the way. The last tip is just a good general thing to always do in music, but something we touched on that I think is important to say again, which is to always use your ears and listen. If you want realistic sound, if you want that from any instrument and you're doing it through MIDI and through a computer, you have to listen to the real thing. So think about drummers that you love. You hear a fill or a groove or something you really like. Don't just approximate what you hear. Get down to the details. What do I like about that fill? What was the expression of that fill? What kind of drum kit were they using? What's their time feel like? Where are they placing beats? What are the little skip notes that they're doing? Like maybe quick things on the kick, like all those little details matter. So you really always in music have to listen, but especially in this case, so you can get as close to realism as you can. And if all else fails, just give up and hire a drummer. that's it. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, put those in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, click here for more videos like this, and go to sweetwater.com for all of your music instrument and pro audio needs. Take that, Nick D Virgilio.